to Hrothgar, home of the orcs. Although, not technically. You see, the orcs, or Orsimer, don't all originate from the Hrothgarian mountains. But to explain that, we need to go back a bit. The orcs in the Elder Scrolls are sort of transformed elves, if you will. Way back in the day, the god Trinimac had a substantial following of elves. These Altmer worshipped this glorious pantheon of war and might due to his strong defense of traditional elven values, greatly opposing Daedric influence. This unfortunately would lead to Trinimac's downfall at the hands of his primary rival, Boethia, the Daedric prince of deceit and treachery. The account of these two gods' confrontation differs slightly, but essentially Boethia, the Daedric prince of deception, challenged Trinimac to some sort of duel. Trinimac seemed to have the upper hand until Mephala, another Daedric prince encouraged by a deception planned by Boethia, stabbed Trinimac in the back. This allowed Boethia to consume Trinimac and use his voice to deceive and mislead his loyal followers. After Boethia was done using Trinimac's voice to speak deceit, she excreted him. Now, Daedric princes don't really have human bodies, so most people in Tamriel interpret this action as a literal movement, if you will. However, Boethia was unable to convert all of Trinimac's followers, and as she excreted the god, humiliated and infuriated, Trinimac transformed into the Daedric prince Malakath. Those Altmer followers who still continued to remain faithful to this new incarnation were also transformed into the shape of what we now call the Orsimer. That's a super quick and dirty summary of that story. In fact, if you dig really deep, it gets even more graphic. But it's enough context for the rest of the video, at least I hope. Going back to Hrothgar, it's the home of the Hrothgarian orc, which is a type of orc. You've also got wood orcs, which settled in Valenwood, iron orcs in the Dragontail Mountains, and mountain orcs have been in Morrowind for so long they're actually considered one of the native enemies of the Dunmer. What I'm trying to get across here is that orcs are in clusters everywhere in Tamriel, and they do this because of Malakath's teachings. Malakath preaches strength through adversity, and this leads to the orcs wanting to stay fragmented and often fighting with each other. One of the biggest plot points for the Orsinium DLC is trying to unite the orcs against Malakath's teachings so they won't be swept away by the other three alliances in this massive world war. We're going to touch on all of that stuff later, I promise, but this was the quick and dirty summary of the orcs and their origins, along with most of the important background information you need to know for this zone. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, allow me to introduce myself. My name's Frostbreak. After playing Skyrim for at least 10 years, I've set out on a unique challenge to 100% complete each zone guide for the Elder Scrolls Online. I'm trying to do them in chronological order by release date, but I'm willing to make little exceptions for zones like this. I have never done any DLC content in the Elder Scrolls Online before. Throughout my journey 100%ing the Aldemary Dominion, learning a bunch of new stuff about the Thalmor, Altmer, and Ayleids, you guys constantly told me the DLC stuff was insane. But I suppose a small part of me didn't believe you. Not to say I found ESO unenjoyable up to this point, but I'd like to apologize. I really wasn't familiar with your game. Maybe it's because I'm a filthy Skyrim casual, but this DLC hits different. In my quest to 100% ESO, I impose a bunch of restrictions on myself to make this game a little bit harder and more immersive. Hrothgar is no exception. This is my 7th episode in the series, so if you need a quick refresher on the rules, they're all in the description, but I'm sure I'll touch on a few throughout the video. Hrothgar is completely standalone. You don't have to watch any of my previous videos before this one, but if you'd like to, there is a playlist link in the description below, and you can watch them all in chronological order. Let's start by talking about the biggest restriction I've put on myself during this series: gear. When I cross the border into a new zone, I must strip down to my lizard birthday suit and remove all gold from my inventory along with all gear. This is to make the game a little bit more challenging, as I find ESO tends to be a bit too easy for my liking. But this rule requires me to scavenge pretty heavily for loot in the early game. Most of my starting loot came from robbing the innocent townsfolk of Orsinium blind, allowing me to get some rudimentary weapons and gear for the rest of my journey. Now that I wasn't punching people with my bare fists, I could start collecting overland loot. Speaking of overland loot, let's talk about the sets you can find lying around the zone of Hrothgar. Like most zones, Hrothgar has 3 armor sets. These item sets were so much better than the base game stuff I'm used to. The 2 main item sets I used for basically my entire time in this zone were Briarheart and Trinimac's Valor. These 2 sets were practically made for me. Everything about them is awesome for a solo playthrough of Hrothgar. Great damage, great recovery, and Trinamac's Valor has a really cool active effect that drops a fragment of Trinamac to damage enemies and heal me. Fantastic. The Orsinium DLC took me exactly 25 hours to 100% complete. I'm a lore junkie, I talk to way more NPCs than you need to, so you could definitely shave off a couple hours if that's not something you're interested in. To 100% complete this zone, not only must you complete the entire map, you have 4 achievements you must also complete. 2 of these achievements are a joke. They're your standard public dungeon task and are super easy to get. The other 2, not so much. The Adventure achievement is normally quite easy to do in most zones, but in Hrothgar, 100%ing the map only completes 28 out of 40 quests. Again, that's with the map 100% complete, so you need to go around looking for side quests that aren't actually part of the overall zone. The quests themselves, once you find them, are of course going to be quite easy. It's just as a relatively new player to the Elder Scrolls Online, it was hard for me to find them. During my livestream, one of my viewers suggested the Journal Quest Log add-on. It basically shows you every possible quest in every zone, so I could just look up which ones I were missing online and figure out where they started. If you're attempting this challenge too, I highly recommend this add-on. The other difficult achievement was the Hrothgar Master Relic Hunter, where you need to collect 20 relics for the House of Orsimer Glories, which is Orsinium's official museum. This was by far and away the most interesting achievement I've ever done in this entire series. There's so much lore and interesting things to learn about these Orsimer artifacts. It took me a while, yes, but I enjoyed every second of it. It had a really cool finale quest where you get to interact with the ghost of King Turog, the king of the first Orsinium way back in the First Era. The Orsinium under construction in this game for the Hrothgar DLC is actually the second one. During Skyrim, you can speak to some orcs and read some letters, and you actually learn that the 4th Orsinium is being recently constructed, meaning the 3rd was destroyed just a few years ago. We're going to be diving a little bit deeper into the lore of this orc capital city later in the video, but it's always interesting for me to learn something new about fallen civilizations in this game, specifically the Dwemer, but the Orsimer and Orsinium is really cool too. Anyway, this achievement took me about 3 to 4 hours because I had missed quite a few of the artifacts in dungeons and delves, so I had to go back and hack and slash my way through and pick them back up again. You get 3 really cool cosmetics for completing this achievement, including the one I'm wearing right now, so I highly recommend trying it out at least. The only other note of caution I would like to point out if you're attempting this challenge as well is that the world bosses are pretty mean in Hrothgar. Luckily, there's lots of people playing here, so I was able to join a group with a couple random players and just go around killing everything. Still, we couldn't even do some of the world bosses with 3 players. We needed 4 for most of them. This is the first zone I've played where I've not been able to solo one world boss. They were very difficult and definitely scaled for groups. We're not approaching spoiler territory quite yet. I know some of you like to watch my videos but skip the story segment so you can play through it on your own. That's perfectly fine, but I will give you a warning before we do that. What we are going to touch on are some of the notable characters, NPCs that'll pop up a lot during your adventure through Hrothgar. So even if you plan on playing it through later, this might give you some insightful background to enhance your playthrough. We already spoke about the Daedric princes tied to Hrothgar at the start of the video. Most importantly, you've got 2 different groups of orcs here. Malakath worshippers, who are found in small clusters around the map, and Trinamac worshippers, found in larger cities like Orsinium. There are way more Malakath followers compared to Trinamac, but the Orsinium area and population have greater resources and what most would consider better quality of life. Our next 2 characters, Chief Bosrog and King Kurog, are the perfect reflections of the Daedric Prince dilemma. Chief Bosrog is a loyal follower of Malakath, while King Kurog is the champion of Trinamac. Again, no spoilers, we're just stating background knowledge here, but King Kurog's main objective is to unite the orc clans together to create a stronger orc race that the other alliances will actually take seriously. The orcs are always scattered everywhere, so most of the alliances or factions take a look at them and kind of see them as pathetic. They don't really represent a threat. King Kurog sources food and resources for his kingdom, distributing them evenly to the clans even if they don't support him or his god Trinamac. Chief Bosrog is a traditionalist. He thinks the clan and chief system the orcs have been using under Malakath's teachings is the better way of life. It's important to note that these two don't actually hate each other, they just have different faiths and values. They still converse and work together when it comes to the security of Hrothgar as a whole, especially against the Winterborn. The Winterborn are the antagonistic group for the first bit of the story, but their motivations are actually understandable. Hrothgar is their native homeland, and these mountains were technically part of the Reach for hundreds of years. That is, until the Daggerfall Covenant came in and pushed them out to make room for the orcs. The Winterborn are attempting to reclaim their homeland, but they're being thwarted by the new inhabitants, the Orsimer. The other antagonistic group in the second half of the story is the Voshrock. I'm not going to spoil anything, but they're extremist Trinimac worshippers, and they have deep roots within Orsinium. They're often wearing similar garments to the regular, non-extremist Trinimac priests. We've also got Evil Eye's Sharp Arrow. Now, I'm not exactly sure how to say her name because different NPCs pronounce it differently, either it's Evil Eye or Evely, but she's not really important to the plot. She's more like a narrative tool the writers use to get stuff done off-screen. Admittedly, she is present during the story quite often, and she does actually get quite a bit of dialogue, but she's more akin to Cadwell from the main campaign rather than an actual character integral to the plot. If you removed her from the story, it's very similar. High Priestess Solgra is another somewhat important character, but less so than Evely Sharp Arrow. She is the High Priestess of the Trinimac religion, more specifically the Trinimac Temple within Orsinium. There are a lot of Trinimac priests and a lot of people who wear that clothing in this zone, so it's important to kind of identify who she is. Finally, you have Forge Mother Olga, King Kurog's mother. Again, no spoilers, but she's an incredibly devoted servant to Trinimac and is the brains behind Kurog's kingship. I'm not saying he's stupid, but Olga definitely has a really important role, shaping the development of the city and has a more logical and calculating approach to conflict rather than Kurog's meathead approach. Wrapping up this segment with a little bit of foreshadowing about the city of Orsinium. Most clan chiefs believe that whenever the orcs unite under one banner, disaster always falls. This is in some regard accurate when you're looking at the city of Orsinium, the beacon of unification under the Orsimer people. During the time of Skyrim, we can read about the 4th Orsinium being under construction, but every time this city is established, it seems to collapse. Some speculate it's due to Malakath's wrath, a curse, if you will, against the orcs for abandoning his teachings and ways of life. But it's also a story about rebirth and transformation, an allusion to the creation story of the Daedric Prince Malakath. So if you're going through the story and you're not quite sure why the clan chiefs have so much motivation to not join under one banner, it's generally because of this. Call it a prophecy, call it a superstition, it's just helpful background information. If you're enjoying the video so far, I'd greatly appreciate it if you considered liking and subscribing. It really helps me out as a new content creator, and the support you guys have been showing is phenomenal. Huge thank you to my members too, these videos wouldn't be possible without you. We just hit 10,000 subscribers in about 2 months of making these videos. Unbelievable. I'm gonna try and organize some kind of giveaway, maybe ESO Deluxe editions, to mark the occasion. I'll post any updates on that front in my Discord, which I finally got set up. We already have about 50 people in there, but the link will be in the description. Just make sure to add my role once you get in so you can see all my channels. Okay, here we are before we get into the story recap. Big fat spoiler alert. If you'd like to skip all the spoilers, you can actually jump to the start of the Verdict environment segment. You should be able to scrub along the timeline, but the chapter timestamps are also in the description as well. If you do jump to that point, I promise it'll be spoiler free after that, but we're about to jump into the spoilers, so do so now. Now, the Orsinium DLC is 9 years old, so odds are you've already completed it if you've wanted to, but I know that some of you are following me in this series and you might want to come back later, and that's totally fine. I try to keep this recap segment close to 3 minutes. Hrothgar has a decently long story coming in at just around 6 hours, so of course I'm going to miss information. The purpose of this summary is to provide essential information and context for the Verdict portion of the video, where we analyze the main story and other parts of the zone. As previously mentioned, Hrothgar is completely standalone. You don't need to do any previous content to understand the story. However, if you have done the Daggerfall Covenant beforehand, you will get some extra context and maybe meet a few characters you might recognize. But I haven't done that faction yet, and I was able to piece together the politics of High King Emmerich and the orcs without much of an issue. With that being said, start the clock, it's recap time. The prologue for Hrothgar begins in whatever city is your faction capital. You meet with an orc who asks if you'll help escort a shipment of supplies to Orsinium. These supplies are to be collected by the capital city and distributed to the clans so that they don't starve through the winter. You discover the shipment has been raided by the Winterborn, the native race to the Hrothgarian mountains. You attempt to recover some of the supplies with the help of one of the chieftains, Bosrog, and his forces. You and Bosrog discover that the location of the shipment was leaked to the Winterborn by a merchant in Orsinium, a traitor. You locate this merchant and squeeze him until he tells you where the stolen supplies were sent. Frostbreak Fortress. Wait a second. Anyway, Forge Mother Olga tells you her son, King Kurog, is already at the fortress starting a massive siege. You assist the siege commanders with various tasks and accompany the king himself to slay the leader of the Winterborn, Iceheart. The king hopes Iceheart's sword will help him win over some of the clan chiefs who refuse to join his kingdom, worship Trinimac, and accept him as the ruler. Spoiler alert, they do not.
Idiot chief who decides to call himself king!
This spurns an attack on Orsinium's Temple of Trinimac by Malakath devotees who have taken hostages. These Malakath devotees keep declaring that clan chief Bosrog sent them to extract vengeance for Kurog's blasphemy. You sneak into the temple and try to rescue as many Trinimac priests as you can that have been taken hostage. King Kurog is worried Bosrog is trying to start a holy war and turn his followers against him. He asks you to help him assemble the Great Moot, a meeting of all the other clan chiefs who haven't accepted his rule yet before Bosrog can turn them against him. You visit 3 different clans and do various tasks for each of them so that their chiefs will attend Kurog's Moot. Some of these quests are better than others, but they don't carry any relevance into the major plot, so I'm not really going to touch on them that much. After getting the 3 clan chiefs to agree to attend the moot, you head back to Orsinium to be stopped by the high priest of Trinimac's temple. She has a very sensitive mission she wants you to undergo that even the king doesn't know about. You need to rescue 1 more clan chief. What she doesn't tell you is that the clan chief is actually Bosrog, the person you suspected was behind the original attack on Trinimac's temple. When you get there, he's locked up in a prison, and he swears he has nothing to do with the original plan and was imprisoned as soon as he got home by Trinimac extremists. These extremists are referred to as the Vash'Rok. There's something bigger at play here, and although neither of you quite trust each other, you're willing to work together to try and figure out what's going on. While Bosrog was imprisoned, he overheard the next stage of the Vash'Rok's plan and where it was taking place. You locate their hideout and disguise yourself with some of your friends in an attempt to infiltrate the cult. You must undergo their challenges to gain their trust and discover the leader of the Trinimac cult is King Kurog's mother, Olga. She sees through your disguise and proposes a choice: kill one of your friends and join them, or defeat the cultist and try to escape. Whatever you choose leads to you escaping the cult and rushing to inform the king of his mother's dreadful plan. He doesn't want you to worry the other clan chiefs and asks to speak with you privately. As soon as you follow him into the room, you find out his mother is ready to assassinate you. The king was in on it the whole time. As you lay bleeding out on the floor, somehow Bosrog is able to drag you to safety to recover. He explains that King Kurog has no intention of uniting the clan chiefs. He's going to wipe them all out at once to solidify his reign. You and Bosrog rush to the moot in an attempt to save as many clan chiefs as possible. Now, it's just you against Kurog and his mother, and probably the coolest endgame boss fight I've done in this challenge so far. You come out on top, of course, and celebrate the victory with Bosrog, who's been declared the new king of the orcs by the clan chiefs he helped save from certain death. Hopefully, I was able to read that out in less than 3 minutes. As I said, the Hrothgar main story is quite long, about 6 hours. There's lots of interesting stuff to do in your campaign, but most of it never comes back up again, so I tried not to dive too deep into those storylines. But now that we're done with the main story summary, let's talk about it. If you're unfamiliar with this series, I tend to give a zone a ranking out of 5. Usually there's 3 categories: the main story, the environment/design, and finally, the side content. Obviously, DLC content will be judged at a higher standard than base game content. One comes with the game basically for free, and the other costs money. So apples to oranges. Of course, overall, it'll probably be better than a base game zone. Let's get started with the main story analysis now that everyone's had that quick refresher of the main campaign. This will probably be a really hot take. I think I'm going to give the main story 3.5 out of 5. Before you lock me up in Arkham Asylum, give me a second to explain myself, alright? My biggest criticism of this story, bar none, is the lack of importance with some of the major choices. Do you know how excited I was when I was given the option to kill my friend for the Vosh Rock and join their ranks? I was over the moon, so excited that the game was gonna let me do an evil playthrough and side with the Trinimac cult instead of going down the cookie cutter ending. I thought it was gonna be a Stormcloaks versus Imperial type decision, something that would want to make you play again at a later date just to see how the other storyline pans out. I cannot articulate how much joy was ripped from my body when I realized it wasn't an actual story path. There's no special ending, there's no secret questline, there's nothing. In fact, listen to what I said live when I figured out I was being misled with the illusion of choice. Okay, just to interject for a second, this definitely was. I did kill the guy because I wanted to ally with Trinimac. Like, I wanted to ally with their clan and just see how that story would take me. But it seems like I am forced, no matter, like that was useless, like that decision wasn't real, and I'm forced to kind of follow this path anyway. Like, I did everything I could do to stay loyal to them just to see how that story would take me, and I guess that's not a real option. So you can actually hear how sad I am that I did all that stuff for nothing. Even your allies' reactions to these major decisions are extremely disjointed. Evely is horrified at what I'd done and how I failed to protect the other friend. She says she trusted me and I betrayed her trust, and once we're done saving Orsinium, she's done with me. 10 minutes later, she starts talking about how we're best friends and how I always see the bright side in every situation. Quote, "I'll wait right here. I want to be ready for the next adventure." Excuse me? The base game Zones did a better job with emotional continuity than this. There's a point in this story where the High Priest is going to be assassinated and you have the option to kill the assassin or let her go. We know there's a secret entrance to where King Kurog is holding the clan chiefs, and I chose to let her go because I thought she was going to run away and I thought I could follow her there. Nope, she just disappears into thin air. Again, not a real decision. There's a point where Evely thinks she spies two suspicious orcs. If you let her shoot them, you run down a path and get ambushed. If you tell her not to shoot them, you make your way there yourself and get ambushed anyway. Again, not a real decision. The second last campaign mission is a massive fetch quest delivering invitation to King Kurog's funeral. I didn't even record this because I was so pissed off. Throughout the main story, we are introduced to two separate errand boys who visibly complain about delivering errands. Two! Granted, I did sacrifice one of them to the Vosh Rock, but there's still one more guy floating around somewhere. Why is the person who just saved the entire region from a tyrannical maniac tasked with delivering envelopes? It's a long mission too. There's like 7 invitations you have to deliver all over the city. Most of the people you deliver invitations to, you had like 1 or 2 dialogue interactions with. Even for someone like me who pays insane attention, I had to double take to figure out who they were. There's 2 missions in the main campaign that you can fail portions of, which I thought immediately was interesting. I like that. I like the option of failure. The 2 missions are when the Malakath devotees are holding the Trinimac priests hostage, and when the Trinimac cult is holding Chief Bosrog. I failed both of them to see what would happen, and I can't say anything of consequence actually occurred. My research online says even if you do save the priests, they can't be spoken to. They're like non-interactable. It'd be cool if they were merchants or something, and if they died you couldn't buy or sell to them, but as far as I can tell, there's 0 consequence for failing that one. I think for the other mission where you rescue Bosrog, there's a prisoner that can help you. At least that's what it says online. And that sounds somewhat useful. Maybe he has a way into a secret entrance or something, but I didn't have to do anything tedious for failing, so I didn't really care. I will concede that the minor decisions you make do seem to have an appropriate minor impact. Remember the merchant who sold out the supply convoy at the very start? If for some reason you chose not to rat him out, like I did, he helps you in one of the later missions with a key to a location you can't get normally, bypassing 5 to 10 minutes of busy work if proceeded as normal. That's a cool little story interaction. Choosing to sacrifice your friend to the Vosh Rock changes if High Priest Salgra lives or dies later in an unrelated scenario. That's kinda cool, I guess. It's an unrelated scenario or consequence, so there's no way I would have known that without doing my research. There's lots of smaller choices you can make during this campaign, and a few do have butterfly effects further down the story. Orsinium probably had the best story of any zone I've done so far, but for DLC content, I was disappointed with the overwhelming amount of decisions you can make that ultimately lead to the same conclusion. There's so many dialogue options in this zone, I was expecting more than a 5% variance, right? Like if I played this zone again tomorrow and picked completely different options, it'd still be over 90% the same. Don't pretend to be a choose-your-own-adventure with loads of choices just to lead us all down the same path. I think that's a little disingenuous. But as I said, if I played this zone again tomorrow, 90% of it would be the same, but that wouldn't be a problem. You know why? Because this zone fucking slaps. It is so far above anything I've done in ESO quality-wise, it's unreal. King Kurog's voice actor is Shia Gorath. I clocked that the first time I heard him speak, but he's a phenomenal voice actor, so I don't really care. We kind of already went through the main story, so I'm not going to rehash it all, but besides the last 30%, this entire campaign had me super interested and engaged with the characters. The Trinimac and Malakath dynamic with different groups of Orsimer was also really interesting, but I don't think they did a good enough job explaining those gods to the casual player. Obviously, I know more about Elder Scrolls than like most human beings on the planet, but if you don't understand who they are, the story loses a lot of its weight and motivation. I'm surprised High Priestess Salgra doesn't pull you aside and explain the full story of Trinimac's transformation and his associations with the different groups of orcs. You can pick up pieces of the story here and there, but for someone like my dad, he's not going to be able to piece that together. You got to do it in one shot, or at least have it as an optional piece of dialogue during the main story, so it's impossible to miss. The environment for Hrothgar is just stunning. There's more wildlife, there's more trees, there's more diverse areas, it's beautiful. I'm definitely biased as a Skyrim player, but this is exactly what I want with an environment. It gets 5 out of 5 from me. The Achatar are one of the most notable animals related to the Orsimer lore. In the books, they're kind of described as slug cows, and they kind of prefer to live in high altitudes. These creatures are as important to orcs as horses were for humanity in real-world history. You know, essential for travel, labor, and they provide meat and hide, just essential for most areas of the population. Very cool to see these guys, and they actually look very different than how I imagined them, but I like the look they did in ESO better than what I was thinking of. Speaking of the ambient environments, you have so much diversity living in one zone, it's kind of incredible. You can notice how much more wildlife there is compared to the base game just by walking around. It's actually a pretty jarring comparison. As far as the geography goes, it's kind of split up into 3 different biomes. The north is just Arctic and ice, the middle is more like tundra, and the south is a little warmer, more similar to taiga. It doesn't feel cramped either. Despite there being 3 different biomes, this zone is pretty freaking big. It's definitely the largest zone I've been in so far. Even after 100%ing it, there's no way I explored it all. The zone design is also a real step up compared to the other zones I've been to. Orsinium feels like a real city, perhaps the first time I felt this way playing ESO. Most of the capital cities in the base game that I've been to in the Aldemir Dominion house like at max 50 NPCs. Orsinium's huge. I probably still haven't explored everything offered in that city. The main throne room is bigger than most towns in the base game. I loved 99% of my time here. And that 1% is attributed to crafting, and crafting is the only thing Orsinium does not do well. I tried to find all the places to deconstruct my stuff, but I eventually just gave up and used the crafting station in Morkel Stronghold on the west side of the map. Speaking of the map, there's decent verticality without feeling intrusive like it was in Grotwood. The water and landscape is just phenomenal, and I really enjoyed the aesthetic of old Orsinium ruins and aqueducts still standing in certain parts of the map. Literally the only thing I can complain about in terms of environment and design is that the giants are too tiny. They're like less than half the height Hrothgarian giants should be, but I'm assuming there's probably a technical reason why they're smaller and not massive. So let's move on to the final category, side content. I'm going to apologize preemptively because this portion is going to be long as hell. Hrothgar has the best isolated side content I've ever done in maybe any MMO before. It can't get less than 5 stars from me. I don't even know where to start, so let's talk about the Maelstrom Arena. This is the first time I've been given a repeatable, rewarding, and somewhat challenging ESO experience, and I'm going to miss it so much when I'm locked in my next zone. In my first run of the arena, I did it live on stream and I took a break halfway through because I had a dentist appointment, but when I got back home, I continued my run and finished it completely. This first attempt took me roughly 45 minutes to complete, and I think I died probably 6 or 7 times. I can't say I actually died to the combat even once, like a boss or a mob never killed me, but I did die a lot to the mechanics. It was a learning experience for me, of course. I had no idea what any of the mechanics for any of the arenas were, and I had to figure them out on my own after I ended stream. That being said, I never looked up a guide, and they were intuitive enough for me to understand on my own, so I appreciate that. The fat Argonian boy gave me the most trouble without question. And I mean, the Maelstrom Arena is also beautiful. I got to see some interesting areas, terrain, and architecture that I likely won't get to see for quite some time, and I thought it was really cool. Let's talk about the side quests. Not point of interests, not main missions, regular side quests. I have never covered this in the side content segment before because most of the time the quests aren't that interesting. That is not the case at all for this zone. Again, no spoilers, but I'll let you know some of my favorite side quests I came across when exploring Hrothgar. The museum questline is awesome. There's a little bit at the start and a little bit at the end, but it feels like a big finale for just a side quest. You can pick this one up by talking to the curator in the House of Orsimer Glories, located in the middle of Orsinium. There's also an awesome Malakath cultist questline you can pick up in Fahrund Stronghold. There's an injured orc outside the stronghold who asks for your help collecting blood, and I'd recommend picking this one up earlier rather than later. The natural time when most people would pick it up is during the main campaign when you're asked to go there. At this point in the main story, you're pretty well known as a champion of King Kurog, who's heavily associated with Trinimac and Orsinium, so it feels a little weird that you help out a Malakath cult, and even weirder that they accept you so easily. Awesome quest though, really felt like one of those Skyrim Daedric Prince quests you can just randomly pick up, and that was amazing. Another notable side quest is found in Honor's Rest, given to you by a Reachman who's just waiting out front. There's a powerful artifact of Malakath called the Vengeful Eye, and you're asked to retrieve it. Once you do, you have 3 ways of dealing with it, and this is actually an impactful decision. There are 3 different endings to this questline. My ending was really awesome, but I'll let you discover that on your own. There were 2 separate public dungeons for this zone, and they were massive. One was a Dwemer ruin, and the other was Old Orsinium. The Dwemer one was especially expansive. It had an outside and an inside, 3 quests, and one of the best final bosses I've ever done in a public dungeon. Old Orsinium was special, not only because of its historical relevance, but this is the first time you actually get to interact with Malakath. I actually wrote in my notes for this zone, not enough Malakath, until I did this dungeon. He does speak to you a little outside of the public dungeon depending on what side quests you pick up, but this was a full-on questline where you actually do a quest for him. The story is well written and you kind of have to pay attention to it. There's 3 puzzles and they can only be solved if you listen to what Malakath says and if you read the books and text around you. Of course, you could just look up a guide online, I suppose. That would work too. You get a really cool memento at the end for your patronage to the Daedric Prince. This public dungeon really reminded me of the Vile Manse in Reaper's March, except that was with Hermaeus Mora. Both of the public dungeons in the Hrothgar zone were by far and away the best I've done so far. Amazing. The points of interest were also all bangers, like phenomenal. The only outlier I would say that didn't quite live up to that reputation is Paragon's Remembrance, which is essentially just a rescue mission. Nothing particularly interesting about that one. Usually in my videos I shout out 3 POIs that I like the most, but I feel bad doing it because they were all so good. But here are some of my favorites. Exile's Barrow is incredibly interesting if you played Skyrim or are interested in dragon priests or dragon cultists. You essentially discover this burrow created by one particular dragon priest and his followers, and you adventure through learning more about them and looking for the treasure room. Sorrow is a massive mountain located in the north of Hrothgar. There you meet up with Stibbins and Lady Laurent, 2 repeating characters from previous zones, and trek up this massive mountain to reclaim the Armlet of Turog. You have 2 options at the end of the story. Either you can leave the armlet at the top of the mountain, or you can donate to the museum where you've been storing your collectibles. It's not necessary for the museum 100%, the actual achievement, but there is an empty display case where you can put it, so if you don't donate it, it might stay empty forever, and it just aesthetically might not look as nice. Honor's Rest was probably the best point of interest mission I've ever done to date. Fantastic storytelling, amazing location and details, and great lore about these 2 amazing warriors killed during the siege of the first Orsinium. You can't skip this one. You can't. It's too good. You have to do it. Overall, the Orsinium DLC earns an outstanding 4.5 out of 5 from me. Basically, all my complaints are about the lack of impact in the monumental decisions you make during the main campaign. Throughout the main campaign, you're led to believe that some of the choices you make are massive story-changing decisions, but in reality, they're not at all. In fact, some of the decisions you make have the exact same outcome no matter your choice, and just provide the illusion of player agency. And to answer your burning question, yeah, this zone is probably rated higher than maybe it should be because I'm a filthy Skyrim casual, and I miss seeing mammoths, snow, giants, Dwemer cities, and Daedric Prince questlines. This zone, it just hit home for me. There's almost nothing I would change about it. As a DLC zone, I think you are absolutely getting your bang for your buck on this one, and I'm pretty sure it was free last month, so as long as you logged in, you got it. But I don't want to go. I 100% complete this zone in 3 days, and I've been procrastinating like crazy with editing and writing the script because I want to keep playing here. I have never felt this way about ESO before. I want to keep playing Hrothgar. I want to keep doing the arena, but alas, the show must go on, right? These videos take a stupid amount of time to make. It took me 25 hours to 100% the zone. I procrastinated the script a little bit, yes, but it's taken me well over 6 hours to write and research. Editing will probably be another 10 to 20 hours. My point is, if you have any feedback for these videos, please let me know in the comment section below. I'm putting in a full-time 40-hour plus work week to make one episode on top of my real-life studies and work. I'm in ultra grind mode, okay? I'm already sinking a load of time into these, so if you have any suggestions, I'm all ears. On top of that, liking and subscribing would be awesome too. Only 30% of you are subscribed, but I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch my videos regardless. With that being said, thank you so much for watching this video. I don't know where I'm gonna go next. Either I go balls to the wall and start with the Morrowind DLC, or I get started with the Ebonheart Pack storyline. Time will tell, but thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.